because we got a lot to get into this morning. All right. Hi, YouTube. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We always love having you here in this Lurie Daniel Favors Show Urban View Experience. We're going to talk a little bit today about some hypocrisies. We're going to talk about this notion that perhaps all women were not created equal. I know it feels a little hyperbolic to say something like that, but I'm beginning to believe that maybe some of us were not created equally. And I have only another woman to thank for that revelation, as much as it pains me. And it truly does pain me to have to make that sort of a statement on a show like this. But there's something about some women, some people generally, to be sure, this could happen with any gender, but I'm talking specifically about women, a particular sort of woman that really is crystal clear about the fact that what they don't like is women. There is this weird thing that happens, and it happens a lot in the Republican side of things, that we should talk about, because it's beginning to upset me and my girlfriends, my homegirls. Look, I messed up the whole me. It's upsetting me and my homegirls that we have these women out there who are acting in the way that Representative Andy Biggs' daughter, Miley Biggs, is acting. We have this young woman. She is 25 years old. And she is the daughter of Representative Andy Biggs, who is a huge Trump cheerleader. He is in the state of Arizona, and he is now, I believe, going to be running for governor in the state of Arizona. And his daughter, is running for state senate. And she is, perfectly fine, I guess, in the general sense of things. Her name is Miley Biggs. You can imagine what she looks like. We're going to hear from her in just a minute. But Miley Biggs is a white woman who has basically decided that she doesn't think women should run for office. And in fact, she believes that women who run for office are really misplaced, because if you're running for office, then who's watching your kids? Like that's like a real quote. Who's watching your kids if you are concerned about what's happening in the world? Like if you're not with your children at home, and if you're not the one that's like the one who's only in charge of their overall upbringing, then are you really being a woman? Like, are you really truly being a woman? And these are the sorts of comments that Miley Biggs has said. She has said it prolifically. She has said it profusely. She talks about it extensively. She went on a podcast to talk about how much she does not think women should be in leadership. On June 18th, however, she made a slightly different decision. But I want to just explain to you who this young woman is. And again, you can imagine what she looks like. You're going to see her in a minute when you listen to the clip that we're going to share. But basically, she is 25 years old. She has just met the Arizona age requirement to run for legislative office. And yet, even though she has said that women should not be in office, she says that women's proper place is in the home, we find out that Miley Biggs is running for the seat her daddy used to have. Which is weird to me. Very, very weird to me. Just last year, when she was 24 years old, she went on a podcast called the Maddie McCurdy Program. I don't know nothing about Maddie McCurdy, but they was having this conversation about the fact that Miley Biggs does not believe that women should hold political office. And she says, honestly, I don't know if I would vote for any female. I don't know if females should be in office. Now, maybe it was a joke. Maybe it was a kiki, but she went on to say things like, there are a lot of really good women in office. I'm not trying to hate on anyone. Like some really good congresswomen. Yeah, I just don't think women should hold office in general. That's my position. That's my stance. I think women should run the home. Now, Miley Biggs might seem weird to the rest of us who live in Earth One, but to some people, who also believe that women's place is in the home, she actually makes a lot of sense. And Miley Biggs is one of the women that the white Christian nationalist pastor Joel Webbin was probably thinking about when he said that he did not believe women should have the right to vote. He didn't say that they shouldn't run for office. He said you should not vote, period. And the reason that he said women should not have the right to vote is because when women get the right to vote, they can't have a white nationalist nation. He said that. He's like, we can't have a white Christian. Oh, he said Christian nationalist, but we know that means white. The white is doing a whole lot of work silently. But he basically says you cannot have a Christian nationalist nation if women have the right to vote, because women, including the white women, will vote for things like women to have rights. Women will vote for things like the Equal Credit Opportunities Act that basically is not only 50 years old and in the crosshairs of the Trump administration, but that act basically is the act that was passed in the 1970s that said women did not need someone with a penis to sign off on them having access to a financial account, a bank account, a line of credit. Because yes, if you are 51 years or older, you are older than the American woman's right to have a bank account or open up a line of credit without a penis-bearing person in her life signing off and giving her approval. So when Joel Webbin, the Christian white nationalist pastor, says that no, women in a white Christian nationalist community could never have the right to vote, he was thinking about women like Miley Biggs. Miley Biggs, who said women are supposed to be the nurturers, take care of home, be mothers. If you're out in Congress or doing something else, what are your kids doing? And she said it with her full chest. She said it with her full chest. Now, this is not a stupid woman, although she's very uneducated. She actually has a whole ass degree. She graduated from the University of Arizona with a degree in political science. So I'm questioning what is happening with the curriculum at the University of Arizona. But, they can't be responsible for everybody who passed through their walls. Hell, we know Byron Donalds went to FAMU for a little while. We can't blame FAMU for the failures of Byron Donalds. But there's a lot happening with FAMU, so we'll leave that alone right now anyway. But Miley Biggs basically believes that modern feminism has changed society, starting with the woman's right to vote. She says it with her full chest. I hate a 9-to-5 schedule. I get home and I don't want to do anything else. Like, women aren't built for this. I just want to be a wife. I just want to be a mom. Now, she say that, like, being a wife and a mom ain't hard ass fucking work. Like, it is very hard work to be a stay-at-home mom. It is very hard work to be a wife and maintain a sense of joy and happiness. And if you don't believe me, ask your grandma, who wasn't allowed to divorce her husband, which she definitely would have done had she had the right to do so. But according to people like Miley Biggs, your grandmama didn't need that, right? She just needed to be more of a woman. And so Miley Biggs says that there are, again, she just said, I don't think women should hold office in general. That's my position. That's my stance. Women should run the home. Now, Miley ain't got no husband. So maybe that's why she's got a different perspective. But just a month ago, she put in paperwork indicating that she was now going to run for state office, which is curious to me because, Miley, do you not want the women who would be your constituents voting for you? Because that's kind of where you're at. You said women should not be running for office, but you're now running for office as like the biggest Nepo baby beneficiary out there. But you're running for office and you're talking about how women should not have power outside of the home. And this is the type of woman who, for me, confirms that all women were not created equally. It's kind of like having a coon in the camp, right? You got a coon in the camp. All black people were not created equally. If you're a coon black person, then you don't get to sit with the rest of us. You sit over there with the rest of the coons. Hey, Byron, how you doing? But the idea that you would have someone who would say with her full chest that she does not believe women should have the right to run for office and that women should be in the house. So she ain't got no husband. She ain't got no kids. She is a Nepo baby whose daddy can basically take care of her. So yeah, I'm sure, Miley Biggs, that for a white woman, young white woman like yourself, it makes perfect sense that a woman's place should be in the home, because typically when white women like you were in the home, you wasn't raising your kids either. It was the black women who you forced to work for you who was raising your kids, Miley Biggs, historically speaking, if we want to look at the history of the thing. And Miley Biggs is really clear about the fact that she thinks that you should be running your household. But Miley comes from a tradition of white women who don't know what it is to run a household. Y'all don't even know what it is to breastfeed your own children. And the reason a lot of us don't breastfeed our children is because we come from a legacy of breastfeeding that basically said the only people who could breastfeed were the blacks and the poors. And that's why a lot of y'all would have wet nurses nursing your own children, because you were so disgusted by the idea of motherhood that nursing your own baby from your own body was gross. And so you'd rather have a person who you forced to work for you to feed your child first before they could feed their own child. That's the sort of legacy that a Miley Biggs come from. But Miley Biggs is running for office. And what's important about that is because Miley Biggs has also said, like, whoa, repeal the 19th Amendment. Literally calling for the removal of the amendment that gives women, white women, the right to vote. And we have to say white women because the 19th Amendment did not give black women the right to vote. The 19th Amendment did not give Asian women the right to vote. It didn't give Latino women the right to vote. It only gave white women the right to vote. And so the idea that she wants to repeal that, but now she's running for office, is a real good indicator as to where this nation is going when it comes to the political alignment. Miley Biggs gets to check off boxes. She is a woman. She's a white woman. And so she gets to sort of appeal to a different class of people. She's not going to be considered as trash as her daddy is. And her daddy is a trash ass Trump supporting lover and a pedophile supporter. At this point, if you are a part of the Republican Party and you're not demanding the Epstein files be released, you are a pedophile protector. It's the party of pedophile protectors. And so she is now in a situation where she is very representative of this new type of candidate that is going to say one thing with a full chest for years, that's like their core beliefs, but then they're going to put on a slightly different face when it comes time to run for office. So we would have to ask ourselves, what kind of policies would a Miley Biggs put in place? Miley Biggs, who is apparently running against the fact that she doesn't believe she actually should be running. She is running for an office that she is not even qualified for, because people with tits and ass and and vaginas don't need to be working outside the home, according to Miley Biggs. We have to ask ourselves, why would there be a perceived benefit in someone like this choosing to run for office? It's important that we do so because you're going to see a lot more information, a lot more news about people switching parties or seemingly turning their back on previous platforms that they held so that they can get into office. Why? Because Republican policies are trash as fuck and don't nobody like them, which is why they're also trying to steal elections, which is why they're also trying to steal redistricting seats, and which is why they have a very clear plan about how they're going to do so. When you listen to people like Steve Bannon, when you listen to people who are talking about the fact that they are really clear about what 2026 theft is going to look like, they're good at this. They're very, very good at this. And so their plan is basically the following. They're going to steal these seats through redistricting, right? That's part one. Part two is voter suppression, because part two is always a part of the plan. But then part three is basically running people like a Miley Biggs who have said clearly women should not have the right to vote, which means when she gets in office, if she really feels like that, she is going to be promoting policies that indicate women do not have a right to vote. She is somebody who has said that you should repeal the amendment that gave her and white women like her the right to have a voice in this political economy. And so we got to ask ourselves, why are they running candidates like this? And it's because they're a bit more palatable than the rough and tumble white nationalists, Clem and Vern, who we don't really like. And so be aware, be wise, and be crystal clear that the party of pedophiles is going to do exactly this. Now, you might be asking me, why am I calling them the party of pedophiles? Because on a Friday, we got a lot to talk about when it comes to Black economy. I'm going to be having today in the podcast episode, I have an entire conversation that will be out at 2:00 today, an entire conversation about the state of the Black economy, which we need to be crystal clear about. We about to go through some things. And this is what I told the Urban View audience. The Black economy is about to go through some things. Between the 300,000 Black women that were let go, we have a situation where now that these tariffs are in place, that went into place, at the stroke of midnight. I almost forgot to tell y'all about this. At the stroke of midnight, we had a whole host, I'm sorry, got to pull out my Financial Times. We had a whole host of new tariffs across the whole world. The whole fucking planet is now tariffs. And a new wave of tariffs, according to the Financial Times, is deepens a global trade war. Donald Trump's global tariffs took effect at 12:01 a.m. in Washington, D.C. yesterday. That was this morning, pushing U.S. import duties to their highest levels in a century as the president launched a new era of trade rivalry. Now, while that's happening, our good friends over at Capital B News have an amazing article, which I'm going to do a deep dive into later today in the podcast, called Black-Owned Businesses Confront Rising Costs Amid Trump's Tariffs. And then when you add to that the fact that we just had a conversation with our good friend Tina, one of our callers, I believe she was was Tina in Alabama? I can't remember where Tina was at, but we had a great caller who was talking to us about her experience. She and her husband were let go from the federal government. She was talking about the fact that there is now support groups coming together to help Black people who have been pushed out, who were coerced to leave the government, because it's going to have a massive impact on our overall economy. And while that's happening, it's easy to get distracted from all of the other things that are taking place. And so it's my job to make sure that we are crystal clear about what's happening, including the fact that the grand old party, the Republican Party, is definitely, most assuredly, the party of pedophile protection. And it's not just because of the Epstein files. And it's not just because people like Miley Biggs have said that nobody who has a vagina should vote and now she wants to run for office. It's not that sort of hypocrisy. It's the fact that Republicans have a protect the pedophiles theme running up and down through their entire party. A top Utah Republican state senator, reportedly worked to change consent laws in the state of Utah after one of his 18-year-old grown-ass male family members was facing first-degree felony charges of child rape and assault. And the state senator basically insisted that his relative facing punishment had nothing to do with this change under the law, but it most certainly had something to do with the changes under the law. The Utah state legislature, based on a suggestion from Senate President J. Stewart Adams, decided to change the law after an 18-year-old man was staring at the potential for years in prison after having sex with after raping a 13-year-old child. The state of Utah went through an effort to change their laws of consent because this man, who is a leading figure in the Utah government, had a family member who could not keep his adult ass penis in his fucking pants, and he ends up violating and assaulting this 13-year-old girl. They changed the laws for consent in the state of Utah to protect this white man's pedophile nephew, or whatever the hell relative he was. This is the party we're dealing with. And it makes sense that they would not want to release the Epstein files, even though everybody was saying they wanted to release the Epstein files. They ran on releasing the Epstein files. the idea that there are pedophiles all up and down that party is important. Now, this is not to say that if you're a Republican, you're a pedophile. It is to say that if you're a pedophile, you're likely a Republican, because that's a political party that has indicated they are willing to protect you at all costs. And it's not just what was happening in Utah. We also have a situation in the state of Florida where the candidate who won Miss United States had to file a restraining order against the Republican congressman who basically is weird and diabolical AF because he threatened to release nude pictures, nude videos, and he apparently has a legacy, a history of violating women and being protected. We're talking about none other than Republican Representative Corey Mills, who, quote, found his name in headlines for unflattering reasons again Tuesday evening after his ex-girlfriend filed a restraining order against him containing a slew of allegations, both serious and salacious, including that he threatened to release the photos, yada, 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 and all the things that we mentioned, and otherwise derail her beauty pageant title and professional reputation. Now, his name might be familiar to you because in May, he was also on the record for stolen valor accusations for soldiers who worked with him, and he is also being protected. It might also be that you are familiar with Corey Mills' last name because last month we learned that he had been evicted from his D.C. penthouse because he owed $85,000, the same penthouse where other women said he assaulted them in February. This man has been very, very busy, and he is an example of how the Republican Party basically works to collect and protect against pedophile allegations, against rape allegations, and it makes sense to me that someone like a Miley Biggs, who believes that women don't have what it takes to make it out in the real world. They don't have the ability to actually think through and to follow through. And when we get home as women, because we are just so full of these womanly emotions and breasts and vaginas, we just can't even think right. We would just rather be in the household. It makes sense to me that they will put up somebody who's ding-dong-alicious as that to be a state representative, to represent people when she herself says she doesn't believe that women should even be doing this stuff. Like women should be in the household. It makes perfect sense to me that this is the party of pedophile protectors. They don't want women to vote. They want to repeal the Equal Credit Opportunities Act because they believe that 50 years ago, when enough white men voted to give white women and other women the right to have access to a credit account and gave them rights to things like no-fault divorce, these men have been, this party has been frustrated ever since. But this is how they roll. And what we have to figure out is, what does this mean for us as we've got a party wholly committed to protecting pedophiles, a party wholly committed to eradicating diversity, equity, and inclusion and undoing anything related to integration, a party that basically says women should be in the household and the only women who are worthy of your support in the political space are women who believe that women should be in the household and only in the household. This is who is leading the country right now. And so when these are the folks who are in charge of what's happening, when they are the pedophile protectors, when you've got women who are clearly not created equally running for political office in a party that basically says women should not have the right to vote because as soon as you vote as a woman, you're going to vote in ways that detract from their ability to have a white nationalist nation. Child, one of the things that we have to consider is, what does it mean to be attempting to create whatever society we are attempting to create for ourselves in a world where this is the reality, in a world where the majority of this nation, and I shouldn't even say the majority, because it's not quite we know it's not the majority of people in the country, but we know that there are enough people in this country who agree with this, that they either voted for it or they didn't disagree with it enough to come out and vote against it. We have to ask ourselves, what does it mean to be creating a space for Black people in a world like that? Right? When you think about the fact that Steve Bannon lays out this plan where basically they're going to use this redistricting effort in Texas to steal as many seats as possible. And we've been talking about 5 seats, but apparently they're trying to get it up to 12, 13, 14, 15 additional seats they're going to squeeze out of Texas. 15 additional seats they're going to try to squeeze out of Florida. That is part one. Part two is a process where basically they engage in massive voter suppression so that they are able to steal the 2026 elections. And then part three is rule on in white nationalist fever dreams forevermore. Today is Friday, which means it's Coochie Chagalia Day. Self-determination is what we're supposed to be focusing on a Friday. What does self-determination look like for a people who live within a larger group of people who want sundown towns back, who have created a legal framework that basically would support enslavement if that's what they choose to do? We are in a society where these folks have said, if you've got a vagina and breasts, you don't belong anywhere but inside the household unless you're Black. Because if you're black, then you definitely need to be in a household. You just need to be in somebody else's household doing the work for them. If that's where we're at, and that's what's happening right now, what does it mean for our organizing? What does it mean to be trying to think about where we're sending our kids to school? What does it mean to be thinking about the next job interview that you have? What does it mean to be thinking about the healthcare options that you either have or don't have? What does it mean to be thinking about Black-owned businesses and supporting them in a time when they are going to essentially eradicate any of the legislative framework or legal requirements that would put you in a position where you have access to capital to the extent that we do, because we really don't? What does it mean to be trying to build a society where we are absorbing all of these blows while white nationalists are building up an arena and a legal framework to allow them to be even more white nationalists than they are right now? These are the questions we're going to have to figure out, because that window, we had 60 years of the Voting Rights Act this week. We talked about this earlier this week. We had 60 years of the Voting Rights Act as of this week, which means if you are 61 or older, you're older than Black people's right to vote in this country without facing a lynch mob, right? What does it mean when we don't have a Voting Rights Act anymore, because they're going to eradicate Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act? We already talked about that. That's what the Supreme Court is poised to do this term. When we don't have a Voting Rights Act, when we don't have a Fair Housing Act, when we don't have a Civil Rights Act, when there is no legal apparatus preventing white nationalists from being as wholly white nationalists as they have always dreamed and desired and yearned to be, what's that mean for our after-school programs? What's that mean for the way that we think about what success looks like? What does that mean for our housing opportunities? They are implementing limitations on Section 8 in terms of the amount of years. They wanted to limit it to 2 years. How are we preparing to absorb the gross amounts of exorbitant homelessness and housing insecurity that we are about to experience at the same time that there's no health care? As all of this is, and again, I've been using this analogy of layers on layers on layers on layers on layers. One of the things we started out with talking about today was that we have all the ingredients in the metaphorical kitchen of our village that we absolutely need in order to not just survive this BS that we're about to enter into, but to thrive. The question we have to consider, and I ask that you meditate on this weekend, you think about this weekend, you sort of focus on what this conversation that we're having today means for not just you as an individual, for your family unit, for your community and beyond. What does it mean to be looking at a 1920s sort of America with our 2025 approach to living and expectation and understanding? We don't had 60 years of integration. Those of us who are my age and younger, we don't know nothing but integration. What does it look like when every single pathway to success is now either in the hands of a Miley Biggs, who doesn't even believe that white women should be outside of a home, or in the hands of senators like the folks coming out of Utah who changed the laws to protect the pedophiles in their family from facing the time that their convictions required? When we're living in a society where the people at the federal level have not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 allegations of harassing women, destroying women's lives, threatening women, coercing women, and a president who is allegedly on every damn page of the 300,000 pages of the Jeffrey Epstein files, whose best friend for 10 years was raping children. Is this the America we trying to be attached to? All I'm asking is that we see that the party of pedophiles is entrenching itself in power. We see that the people who believe that women should not have access to anything but being inside the home, unless you're black, then you can be a slave woman. You can definitely be a slave woman. When we're looking at the fact that they are coalescing power in many, many ways, while we are reeling from the impacts, I need us to really start giving some time, some real conversation to what this looks like in the long term. Because we've had this analogy before. If we could go back in time and warn our ancestors about the hellishness that they were about to enter in the late 1400s and early 1500s when the Portuguese ships were coming and they began the slave trade and began enslaving Africans and transporting them across the waters into what we now know as the Western Hemisphere, what if there had been a warning? What if we could go back in time and say, don't do this shit. Don't trust them. Don't let them ships dock it. If we'd have had warning, would we have moved differently? Would we have organized differently? We got warning right now. We are very clear. And when the podcast comes out later today, we're gonna have this deep dive on the Black economy and what it is that we're dealing with. You're gonna see, like, we got some real conversations we need to have. And I know we want to put boots on the ground. I know we want to frolic and play. I know it's August, and so we sense that summer is sort of coming to an end. So we want to be outside. What's the village doing? Where's the village going? We have been hit with an onslaught. We are being hit with an onslaught. And when we think about how the world is moving on from this country, when we think about how everybody else is like, y'all on some crazy shit. Y'all got President Dumpy Pants and I don't know what y'all doing, but we moving on. You got Japan and Brazil talking about what we going to do is cut America out. We're going to have our own beef trade because they crazy. You got people like looking at the trade deal, the tariffs that just came out last night. They're like, y'all motherfuckers is crazy as hell. And we are moving on without you. If the rest of the world is moving on without America, and we're here in America, at some point, we're going to have a different conversation. At some point, it ain't going to be enough to just have mutual aid. Okay? At a certain point, we're going to have to think about things differently. And I am inviting us to have those conversations sooner rather than later. And I'm not just saying within yourself, your immediate family. Yes, all that is important. As a 44 million body strong, Black people, we need a plan. The rest of the world is moving on. They are happy the same way that America don't think about nations that are like third world, fourth world, fifth world nations. And I know we don't mean like that terminology. That's how the rest of the world is beginning to think about us. And so the 44 million of us who are here, we better figure some things out, because I don't know what it's like to be stuck on an island with a bunch of psychopathic sociopaths. But it feels like we're going to experience really quickly what it looks like to be stuck on an island with a bunch of psychopathic sociopaths. And that's why we've got to have a different conversation. And I really wish we could go into this Friday with joy and lightness and air and all the happy, wonderful, fun things. But, honey, you better use this weekend to pray and figure out the work. Better use it, because the window of opportunity is getting much, much tighter, much, much smaller. And we're going to have to be able to unpack that. 866-801-8255, 866-801-TALK. Shout out to all of you in the YouTube family, all the new members for YouTube and Urban View. That's all I was saying. Y'all better be, if you only connect with Urban View hosts on Urban View, I'm just encouraging you right now. You need to make sure you are connected to the host outside of just the listening apparatus. Do with that what you will. But shout out to all of you who are part of the YouTube family and who have become members of the YouTube channel. I appreciate all of you. Want to give a special shout out to TMFJ, because you have been consistent and ended up getting a whole bunch of memberships to give away to people yesterday, which I did not know until after we got off the air. So thank you to you. We have a lot of good things coming with there. And with the membership, is basically you're going to get, you get the little badge, you get priority response to your comments and whatnot. And we're going to be expanding and building on that a bit. Right now, we're just dipping our toes in the water, because we're going to have as many spaces as possible to gather, as many spaces as possible for us to build, and as many spaces as possible for us to figure it out. I've said before, I don't know what it is to build an underground railroad right now. I don't. But I do know that I'm going to have to learn, and I'm going to have to study, and I'm going to have to read, because the rest of the world is moving on. And we are here with these sociopathic psychopaths who are doing everything they can but calling on the name of Jesus, be it Black Jesus or otherwise, to be their better selves. And that's something we are going to have to figure out. YouTube, we appreciate y'all. Gotta go. We're going to head into, we're going to head into commercial break. Urban View, we're at the end. We're at the end of our show today. I really appreciate the energy that we have been able to share with each other. Shout out to Glenda Carr for joining us from Higher Heights. Once again, we appreciate you. We got a lot to figure out. And later on today, the podcast episode will be out. The State of the Black Economy. We about to go through some things, and I need us to know it and not be caught unawares, and do the implementations of the plans. That's the part. Do the implementations of the plans. Somebody in the chat said I might be the oldest person here. I was 4 years old when the Civil Rights Act passed. The creator willing. This mess is so disturbing to me. Yeah. Those of you who saw what it was like before civil rights, experienced civil rights, and then see what's happening now, you know what I'm talking about. You know what time it is, and we're going to need your energy and your insight now more than ever. Amina, how much time do we have? I can't take a call, can I?
We have like a minute left.
We have a minute left. All right, we got to go. YouTube, we appreciate y'all. We love y'all. Urban View, listen, I'm going to be back with y'all on Monday. Love me some Urban View. We're going to keep it going. We got the podcast episode coming out later tonight. Start your conversations. Engage, build, think about what a future looks like that does not rely at all on the pedophiles. Think about what your future looks like if you had to do it completely, totally, 1000% on your own or with the resources of your community, without their banks, without their funding, without their grants. What would it look like for us to build a world similar to the way that D.W. Gurley had to when he and his wife were putting down the foundation for what would ultimately become Black Wall Street? And then we got to think about how to protect it. We're going to head into the end of the show. I keep saying we're going to commercial break. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. I need you to do 3 things for me. Number 1, figure out how your purpose aligns with the needs of our people. Walk in it with your back straight. Number 2, tap into your Harriet Tubman, Marcus Garvey, Nat Turner loves. You learn to love us harder than you were taught not to. Learn to create pathways of opportunity for those who need it, and learn to uphold and defend the sanctity of our lives. And then number 3, figure out your next steps and how much goodness you can put into the world.